Dr. Fraga, thank you so much for being with us here. Let's talk about the flowers. And why does it seem like these flowers are so finicky when they're in bloom?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, wildflowers, when they come in abundance, it's not something that happens every year. It's an event that maybe happens every 5 to 10 years, and it really depends on the climate, the precipitation, what's happening in terms primarily actually in the form of winter rain, really determines whether or not we'll have a significant bloom.
So how is climate change actually affecting the growing season?
Yeah, well, under climate change conditions, we expect that the West will experience prolonged drought and also increased temperatures. And so that prolonged drought, especially in the winter rainy season, is going to have a significant impact on these plants' ability to germinate and to come into reproduction. And that's the time when they bloom. That's what the bloom signifies, is a mass event of plant reproduction, which is really amazing. And it's also a visual signature of what's happening in the climate, because if we don't have above average, it has to be above the long-term average of winter rain or of total rain for it to really make a magnificent display. And so if we're getting about average or below average precipitation, then we won't have those displays.
Okay, so let's talk more about that then, the dry part of it. And we've had this mega drought in the West, which, by the way, it doesn't look like there's really any end in sight. Could that potentially kill off these flowers or make the duration in between when we see them longer?
Yeah, it definitely will make the duration in between those significant blooms longer. It may take many decades for those blooms to really be diminished because they have what we call a soil seed bank. So these plants are annual plants. Their whole duration is just 1 year is their whole growing cycle. And when there isn't significant amount of rain, they're living in the soil as a seed. So they're dormant in that phase. And so they can stay dormant in the soil seed bank for many years, waiting for the right conditions for it to happen. So they can stay safe in the soil seed bank during prolonged times of drought until we get significant winter rain. But it may definitely make those time periods between the blooms much longer.
Okay, so let's head to the other end of the spectrum. So you can get super blooms. So what's the problem with that if you get super blooms?
So when we have super blooms, it's an amazing cultural event and also a biological event. So you get people really excited about the blooms, and that means we have a lot of increased visitation on our public lands and national parks, state parks, and other areas where people go to recreate and enjoy nature. That's really in itself not a problem that people are excited and want to see the blooms. It's just I would say, the real significant increase in visitation and the lack of resources to really deal with those increased visitors. And so when you have more than 2 times the normal visitation to an area, and you have people going off trail and trampling on the wildflowers, causing soil compaction, and these sorts of things. So we actually saw this in 2019 when there was a massive bloom of poppies in Southern California. And we saw social trails created and sort of the effects of people influencing others on social media to go out and take those same kind of photos. And so that can actually be really harmful to these really sensitive systems.
I want to go back to the drought really quick, just a quick follow-up with that. How long can these seeds survive really without any rain? Say if we had a mega drought. I mean, at some point, do they totally shrivel up and die? How many decades can they last without getting that moisture?
Yeah, there's a lot of studies going on about the longevity of these soil seed banks, and we know that they can live for decades.
Okay.
But another potential impact from climate change is that, let's say we get a significant amount of precipitation, say in January, like we did here in California, but then the months of February and March are dry and very warm. That means that those plants that germinated may not successfully go complete the reproduction and establish seed for the next generation. So that could potentially exhaust the seed bank. So that's one of the potential impacts that we could see to these really magnificent ecosystems under climate change. And so for a magnificent bloom to occur, we really need prolonged rain throughout the winter season into the growing season for those plants to persist and complete their life cycle.
So you were talking about the tourists, and how they are trampling, on the plants. So what do they actually need and to keep in mind to better preserve these plants?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things we can do to increase conservation of these really important ecosystems. One is just staying on actual designated trails and not going off trail to get that perfect picture. You can, through cropping or other mechanisms, get the picture that you want without having to trample all over the plants. You can also spread the word and encourage people to participate in responsible wildflower viewing. And you can also support organizations that are conserving and preserving these ecosystems to make sure that we have enough resources to deal with increases in visitation.
Dr. Naomi Fraga, really good information there from the California Botanical Garden.